I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
It is Hard Knock Radio. DaveyD hanging out with you this afternoon. Yesterday, we kicked off things with a conversation with Dr. Jared Ball. He is the author of a book called The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. The book has been recently released in a second edition. It's been somewhat updated, and we wanted to have a conversation, especially since Dr. Jared Ball has been in some pitched debates and conversation from a number of luminaries who talk about black folks having $1 trillion buying power and that how it could be leveraged. Of course, Dr. Ball has long said this is a myth and we need to dispense with it and really understand what's at stake. We left off our conversation yesterday by talking about how other groups have been targeted because of their potential buying power. And just to kind of catch folks up, one of the things that's been highlighted in Dr. Jared Ball's book is that the whole myth of the black buying power is centered around a marketing campaign that emerged in the 1950s. And prior to that marketing campaign, as it pertained to black people, there was a marketing campaign that was very similar in approach and scope that targeted teenagers, and so that's where we left off the conversation. So we're going to jump back into it. Pull up a chair and enjoy here on Hard Knock Radio. If teenagers, white teens, were just to spend money with each other, would they be, can you make the same argument that's been made with black folks? If white teens got together and put their buying power together, would they be okay? Or would it be a situation where are they getting this money from? That's the first thing. Or they're getting it from areas that they don't control. In this case, it's their parents, right? So it's not really their money, but they have the potential to spend that. And even said that the potential to get the money is there. So if I use that same argument, which predates the myth of the black buying power, but it's an adaptation of that, then it's like we have $1 trillion, but do we have $1 trillion? Or do I have to go to work for some white guy to get that? And that white guy may go, I don't think I want you working here anymore. So then where do I get that $1 trillion then?
No, what you're raising is this is such a beautiful, brilliant question, because this is sort of the point. If we look at how buying power is constantly used, it's applied to every group and every municipality and every segment of society all the time, because to the point I'm getting at, and to your point, it's only there for marketing and advertising. It's not an assessment of the actual condition or political or economic strength of a community. So when they're talking about the buying power of white teens between 15 and 18, white girls between 15, white boys, like it gets they're not saying that if these white boys and whatever, if these teens circulate their dollar and invest in each other's businesses, they could free themselves from centuries of oppression and overturn conditions of colonization. They're not saying that. They're just simply saying, hey, when we do surveys, white boys right now are spending, X amount on jeans. Let's target our ad revenue and get that jean revenue.
Right.
That's it. And it's only when it comes to black people has it been weaponized into this. And that's sort of why I talk about the turning points of the 50s, the post-World War II moment, and then the post-Nixon moment. Because these are the point I'm getting at is it's only weaponized as a political mechanism against black people, and it's only confused when levied and increasingly I'm seeing it. I just haven't done the work yet. Increasingly, it is starting to be targeted this way towards Latinos, towards the LGBTQ community, and even in some segments, the disabled community. With the same kind of idea, like if you all would just get your money right, you could, you wouldn't have to be. But it's really only with Black America that it has been consciously weaponized into as a tactic against our collective uplift. And that's the point. It doesn't account for all the other things that would need to be involved for a community to actually turn whatever wealth they do have into more wealth and into more power. So it doesn't account for some of the things I pointed to that even you mentioned. It doesn't mean that it doesn't account for where is the money coming from. So if we had to I used this example online the other day. We had to the law in our community that we have to have housing insurance worked to have the housing insurer say, we looked at your roof and you need to have your roof replaced or we can't insure your house. So we had to get the roof replaced. To get the roof replaced, we didn't have the 20 whatever thousand it cost on hand. So they said, no problem. We have an arrangement with Wells Fargo. We'll give you the loan, pay off the roof, and then you pay Wells Fargo back. Now, on paper, this will be on the docket as a Black expenditure of $20,000.
Right.
But it doesn't account for the fact that I got $20,000 only to use on replacing the roof. I can't take that 20 and invest it into a business as if that would, do anything. I can't invest it in stock and flip it. I can't, not legally at least. I have to use it only for the roof. Same thing with cars, with the buying power number doesn't account for the amount people spend on credit, on debt, going into debt. So it's just, they're just saying if Jared goes into Christmas debt buying $10,000 of gifts on his credit card, that's $10,000 in Black buying power. That's not money that I could take and invest anywhere else. That's not $10,000 I have and can flip any way I want. It's $10,000 I've borrowed and gone into debt for, but generated wealth for those who own those things I bought. So
right. Well,
that's what they're measuring.
The argument would be to spend $10,000 in a Black-owned business, and then the money would circulate in the community. That's where this myth gets really enhanced. So, using your argument, you get a roof, you get a loan from Wells Fargo that you have to take out, right? Because basically, you had a law that came in and says we're going to extract from your wealth from these segment of people. So in order to have insurance, you got to have a $20,000 roof on your house. And you can either have enough credit or resources that you can avoid Wells Fargo and just pay for it yourself, or you can take out the loan, which you had to do through their bank. And then maybe you can get a Black contractor, so they'll get some of that 20,000. And so the myth is, or the understanding is that we're circulating that money around, but the question is how does that start to end poverty? Does that start to move you out of your $20,000 commitment to a bank? If you lose your home, does the contractor come along and go, I got you, or does he give you a discounted rate? I mean, I don't know. These are the things that come to mind. Like, how does it start to trickle down? Because that's the word that they use for the general public. If you give all this money, it's going to trickle down. So basically, you had $20,000 and it's supposed to trickle down to the community. But once you're out of that, once you're $20,000 in debt, how will that trickle down help you?
It doesn't. So there's so many, again, you're pointing out there's so many things that have to be expanded upon. So where are the Black contractors who do roofing? How many of them are there? If they want to expand their business, because there were none out here, by the way. If you want to expand your business to accommodate the increasing business of roofing repair, you would have to then get venture capital investment from some other entity if you're that Black contractor. Otherwise, you have to subcontract yourself out to an existing bigger white contractor. Then ultimately the point ends up being, and this is why Black capitalism becomes ultimately the sort of the subsidiary target of the broader capitalist problem, is that even if you find the Black businesses to support, all that you're ending up doing is creating a Black class of people doing better. And we ignore the fact that even in a white supremacist, white-dominated capitalist country, there is plenty of white poverty and white inequality that exists even within themselves. We have to be reminded that the most famous critic of capitalism was a white Karl Marx, talking almost exclusively about a white Europe. And he was saying, even when everybody is white, capitalism don't work. And then if you start adding in the colonized majority population of the rest of the world, it definitely isn't going to work. So even if we create a subsidiary of Black businesses that we want to support, and I advocate supporting all of them, we'll end up realizing, as been argued for the last 150 years, as Abram Harris said 100 some years ago, we'll end up creating a Black business class and an elite that doesn't do anything, even if it wanted to. It isn't capable of creating the change for the rest of us that would be required, because there's so many, again, what areas of there is no, we would just have to keep going in terms of what sectors of the economy are Black businesses in, how, to what extent are those Black businesses dependent on Black consumers who themselves don't have a lot of money, so therefore those Black businesses can't make as much money. And then we start to realize, as I did in some work with Diedrich Muhammad and others, that in finding this research that showed that from 1992 to 2016, 1992 to 2012, Black people created more than 2 million businesses, and their capture of the total sales revenue in the country went down from 1% to 0.3% or something like that.
Wow.
In other words, even when Black businesses are created, they're not able to capture that much more money because they're in very limited sectors of the economy. They're not where there's not that much money, and most of it is service and dependent on Black consumers. So that's why even in the white world, there's only one Amazon, there's only one Google, there's only one, there's only Apple and Microsoft. There's a tendency towards monopoly and oligopoly in a capitalist, imperialist, colonialist world. So so whether you put a Black face on it or not, we have a major problem here. And Black people, again, I'll just wrap it up here again, are being encouraged through this mythology that our pathway to liberation is through a process through which no one in human history has ever gotten free. And that's what I'm encouraging we reassess.
Jared Ball, let me ask you this. I'm going to use the word extraction, because, that seems to be a word that all this describes. I look at a group of people, I look at Jared Ball and all his fellow professors, right? And I come along and go, they're all going to need pens and computers. How much can we extract from them? So Jared Ball makes $20,000 a year. His colleagues make $20,000 a year. Let's see how we can, get 500 of that 20,000 from each of them. So I'm extracting from the community, right? And my business model is going to be looking at different demographics, to see what I can extract. So for professors, it's one. It could be doctors, another, but I've identified a bunch of people, and then I appeal to them in such a way that they buy this product that I'm creating. With Black businesses, the question that I ask is, how much are we extracting, from other demographics outside our community? And is that necessary for us to do that in order to make it? So, for example, I mentioned the thing about white teens in the music industry, right? That is a very lucrative demographic. Can we cross over and capture them, right? Which is why you have the boy bands, which is why you have your Taylor Swifts, right? Which is why you have your BTS, and you have Black artists producing them, because there's money to be made with this holy grail of people that will buy those things. So, to a certain degree, like, the success of the Ghetto Boys in many rap groups, to a large degree, has to do with the fact that they were able to tap into that white audience there, but how do we measure that? How much of that extraction from that particular demographic outside our community, how much of that do we get to keep? How does that manifest itself? And then how does that start to benefit us in the long run? And if we're opening Black businesses, can we just exist just selling to Black folks, or do we have to have an extraction strategy, which it seems to be the case for other businesses? They have an extraction strategy for us, and part of that extraction strategy, to come back to one of the points of your book, was to say that we have $1 trillion You know, it's that was the extraction strategy. Put a black face on it, make it seem like it's black power, and then have white corporations, you know, give a few dollars to some folks. That was the extraction strategy.
That was the exactly, and so the parallels I'm hearing you, what you're raising is are there, that if you want to be successful as an artist, quote unquote, what we understand to be successful, you need a white audience. I mean, the more I've moved into these YouTube spaces and belatedly learned how some of this is working, that's the same problem there. That if you want a big YouTube audience, if you want the biggest YouTube audience or the biggest, most lucrative YouTube audience, you need white audiences. So that's so doing work that targets a black community specifically is already going to reduce your audience
And
share.
let's just be clear
Go ahead.
about one
Sure.
other thing on this
Sure.
too. The valuing of white audience is an artificial thing as well. You know, there's a whole thing to say, you know, white males 25 to 54, that is the lucrative market. Then you go women 18 to 34, that's the second lucrative market,
Right.
with white women leading the charge. And the argument is that they can extract money from the white male, the wealthy white male, and we go all the way down, right, to see who has access to this money tree, right, which they're holding up and saying it's the white male. So your connection to this is what gets its value. So a black team is not that valuable except to maybe signify to people that it's cool. And you know, that was the whole thing where we saw like these white kids in the 50s were looking at black blues artists and mimicking them. But then it was like, let's get Elvis and create an ecosystem outside of that. But they needed to have it co-signed by the coolness of blackness. But they weren't trying to sell to black. It was like, let's extract the other way. And so that's so you know, I'm just putting this value thing on it. It's like we need to go to the white folks to sell. I don't know how much of that is just a hard numbered fact versus a myth in terms of what is to be seen as valuable and isn't. So again, comes back to the question, can you just exist off black folks alone if you open up a black business and be successful without having to do with this? And I guess my last point, there was a lot of lynchings and the burning down of towns.
Yeah.
When folks realized like we can't extract money from this community, so burn it down, you know, because they needed, you know, that extraction. That was an extraction strategy too. You know, we have that money funnel in our direction.
And you absolutely. And I just want to, you got to shout out our comrade Two Black and his forthcoming work on laundering black rage for some of the history around the mythologies of Tulsa and other. But look, we just saw it again now with the news that broke. We just covered it on our show the other day around Killer Mike and the Greenwood Bank claim. First of all, It was never a bank. It's always been a financial platform that brings black people into banking, and it's supported by a white bank in California, I believe, Coastal Bank or whatever. But the point being that it needed major white bank investment from JP Morgan and Bank of America and elsewhere. It needed a white bank to legally back it as a bank because it wasn't able to be a legal bank. And then it used the black faces of Killer Mike and others, Andy Young and others, to promote to black people, this is for you, this is a solution to our problems. And all it ever did was prop up Mike and his fellow investors and make them some money. And it was just, to the extent the Washington Post had it right, and I suspect they do, it's collapsing. It's not making any, it's being seen as misleading its investors. And it's not able to, but the primary point, never mind the political failure of promoting black capitalism as a solution, it is demonstrating the problem that is always the case. Going back to Friedman's Bureau Bank, and that Mehrsa Baradaran's work does such a great job of exposing. The bottom line is black people don't earn enough money to pool enough resources to have those resources distributed into the broader economy in any way that will meaningfully bring back returns that overturn the existing inequality. That's just the problem. So if Black people are not, if your target audience as a consumer base is Black, and your goals for what or how you define success are limited, yes, you can earn a decent living. You can survive. But what the problem is if you want to compete with the truly elite, or if you want to, and which is the problem for me, claim that this is a pathway for Black collective advancement. That's where everything falls apart. So you at some point always are going to need, if you want that, what is ultimately defined as success in this country, you're going to need white audiences, white venture capital, white political support. We just talked about it the other day somewhere where Clarence Avant, the documentary that came out about him a couple of years ago, the Black musical godfather, blah blah blah. He was the Black gatekeeper to bring in artists for his white bosses. And as the documentary showed, as soon as he ran into trouble, his white friends bought him a house, gave him $250,000 to buy a house. I mean, but then he turns around and tells it as though Black people have to just work harder and do better, and not realizing and being honest about his own. But this is, again, so that's all I'm really trying to say. Like if any business or anybody selling something, the ultimate goal, this is why we even see, by the way, whether it was with Greenwood, not with Greenwood, but there was another. Well, what we see often happening is that the goal, whether it's Black or white business, by the way, is to get big enough to where you either can expand and take over a market, or where you can be bought out by the bigger,
Right.
the bigger, and then you take that as a success. You want to sell out in that sense.
Meaning that you want to sell your business because
you want to, because the bigger fish has come in and bought you out, is really what I'm saying. And so my point is,
the reason for doing that would be what? Is because the amount of money that you're being offered is obscene, or is it because it's an offer that you can't refuse, meaning the market, like, let's just say in theory, I'm going to open up a bank in Oakland and we're doing well. And now we need to kind of expand, because in order to really continue the success, we have to expand. But, for lack of a better word, I'll just use this term, but the mob controls the banking system in San Francisco. So they're not letting you set up shop in San Francisco or set it up in LA. So what somebody will often do is come along and say, I'll buy it off you. But if you don't let me buy it off you, trust me, you're not going to be in these stores. You're not going to be in this location.
Look at with coffee. I mean, I think a good example would be with like how could a Black startup coffee, white companies can't even do it, but how could a Black coffee maker compete with Starbucks at this point? Starbucks could just easily say, if you sell out to us, or we'll just put a store right next to yours. We'll just, and then watch what happens. So this is Apple and Microsoft do it all the time. People create something. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me tell you a story, which to make your point. There was a club in San Jose called the Beehive, right? Now I'm going to tell this story. And it was very popular. A lot of us DJ'd there. Big shout out to Manessa. He was that guy. And it had a big audience. And when I worked for Clear Channel, they wanted that market. I remember sitting in a meeting. They wanted that market, and they couldn't figure out how to get the market. And the Beehive didn't need to do advertisement. They had people buying. It was like, we got a crowd. We don't need anything. And I'll never forget the meeting that we were in. And at the time, the Clear Channel folks was like, how do we get into that market? He doesn't want to buy ads off our station. And they said, we need to buy a club in San Jose. And he put somebody on the job and said, man, there's a club right across the street from the Beehive. It's called Dimensions. How much is it? It's like $500,000. Buy the club. And I remember saying, we're going to own that market, right? So they bought the club right next door, specifically so they could knock out what was essentially a mom and pop business or be competitive to it, right? And, we've seen that over and over again. I can give you a dozen stories about promoters, come on, and they come along and go, we'll just do a concert right next door. So those are the you know, that's the nut and barrel. But I'll never forget being in that meeting, and it's like, we're going to control that market, Jared. I don't care. What do we need to do? Buy the club. You know, we probably owned the club for like a year, and you know,
Yeah, to them
eventually
it's
he
a
did.
short-term thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not even, yeah.
but
No, I mean, I know in the industry you could literally do days of endless programming on that. I know. And I mean, I've even look the cannabis story where he talks about how the industry shut him down against Eminem to the extent he's got it right. He basically tells that story that he said that the industry got behind Eminem and bought out venues and publications so that cannabis couldn't be heard. So it's very we see it in publications. I mean, if you get if you put out a book, uh uh I talk about it all the time. In my own case, I couldn't get the local busboys and poets to carry my book, but they'll carry other people's books. What is on what basis? I don't know. I don't know. But it's just a by the speaking to busboys and poets, to your point, I used to hang out at Cafe Mawanage in DC, right where the new Howard Theater is, next to the Howard Theater, the new Howard Theater. And when Busboys and Poets opened up in DC, it was this beautiful, shiny, black, symbolically, not black owned, but symbolically situated space. And people started going over there. And I was like, no, out of solidarity, we need to stay over here. But eventually, even before the mysterious fire burnt up Cafe Marwanage, people were already moving. You could just see what happens when the brand new, shiny, hot, new, well invested, promoted space shows up. It will, so yeah. So that's really, so
and
ultimately, all I'm saying is, yeah.
even to that
Yeah,
point,
no, go ahead, go ahead.
there were companies, you know, if I think we even talked about it, some of the big radio stations that were owned by conglomerates were coming in and saying we could do a poetry night, and they would mimic it. They
Absolutely.
were coming into these places and they would be like, you know, we'll use Jared as the promoter. You know, we're going to fund it and we're going to set up a coffee shop. We're going to put couches in there, except instead of maybe having the radical black poet come in, we'll have maybe the Taylor Swift poet come in, right?
Wow.
And you know, so that
Mhm.
happens. But the point that I think we're getting at is that once you kind of see that lay of the land, then it's kind of like, do you want to sell your business or do you want to battle on this front? And
Exactly.
and
And in the business sense, it makes sense. You sell out and then you take your money and go invest and do something else. But so the only point that I'm getting at is that what often happens is that the mythology around why we should support black businesses is used by black businesses to survive, which is that by supporting them we're supporting all of us, which is fundamentally false. But it is and then we don't look at the realities that black businesses have to deal with in competing with. Look at what Ice Cube has talked about in terms of the big three versus the NBA. I mean, you know, just the whispers about don't play over there, or you'll lose a contract over here, or don't support that if you or you won't be able to support us over here. Like all kinds of, again, to the extent that it's true, we don't know, but it comports with business standards. I mean, this is what and what many have as their goal. I want to get big enough to get sold to a bigger fish. And instead of just being honest, what we get is this mythology around black businesses have always been a key component to civil rights and human rights, and black businesses is the way to freedom and the buying power. And ultimately, what I'm saying about my argument is that these mythologies work against, or in this case, black people, by telling them you are the reason you're poor, you're financially illiterate, you're not spending your money wisely and investing wisely. Otherwise, you'd be much better off. And that's just not how it works. That's just false. And what I want for us is to get past this mythology so that we can develop the real analyses and responses that we need.
where does the Marcus Garvey fit into all that? Because that's been a counter argument that's been raised against the book, your book. Is like
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Garvey, look what he set up. He had businesses, he had, you know, he kept it all black. He becomes the model, he becomes the symbol for what we could strive and be. You know, he had one of the largest movements today that we've seen. So was Marcus, is there something to be learned from what Marcus Garvey was doing? Was he in many ways an enhancement of the myth, even though the myth comes after him, or how do you factor him
He
into
did
this?
enhance it. It's funny. I don't do too much time, spend too much time on it, but one of my favorite little tidbits in my book is that there's a funny moment where, that he and Du Bois had a very hostile back and forth. They were YouTube beefers before with
Before
what's going
YouTube,
on
yeah.
today. And one of the things that Garvey pointed out was in a joking fashion was that Du Bois had finally realized that buying power is real and the economic strength in the Black community could be used for certain political purposes. So in that one moment, they both agreed. They were both wrong, I think, and Du Bois would live long enough to realize that and say so publicly. Garvey didn't have that opportunity, but the point is, a lot of us have been encouraged to believe in this for a lot of different reasons. So I'm not condemning them for it. I'm just pointing out why that happened and how in this one instance they're wrong. But to my point, because of my emphasis on the need for political power, what happened to Garvey is very instructive. That at the end of the day, whatever, first of all, his organizations were infiltrated by the nascent FBI, will develop into the eventual FBI.
J. Edgar Hoover
J. Edgar Hoover. He was like that was like his first mission was to get rid of Garvey, and so that was part of it. And then politically, his businesses were whether the criticisms are accurate or not, or to whatever extent they're not, he was politically condemned and blocked from expanding those businesses, and eventually having no political power to keep him out of prison, and eventually keep him out of exile and deportation. So my point is we need that it wasn't his business, for whatever people want to say about his lack of business acumen. It wasn't that ruined him. It wasn't that would cause the downfall, and it wasn't that I think was his ultimate flaw analytically. It was that we didn't have the political power, the movement strength to protect him, or for him to protect his movement and his efforts. And that's ultimately what I'm saying. If you don't, that businesses require you need political relationships, whether it's for zoning and tariffs, or whether it's for incorporation, or whether it's just to keep the police from coming in and destroying your operation, or for calling you whatever they called Garvey and deported. So you need, that's why the political elite have constructed, and as others have put it, captured the federal government and its public policy, because they know that that's what you need fundamentally to protect whatever business and militarist operations you want to develop.
But in 2024, people are now moving into the area of media, digital, digital operations to make their money. They're seeing, like a Shannon Sharpe. I started off with Cat Williams, said he's going to make $300,000. They see about a Joe Budden, or they see the not Breakfast Club, but Drink Champs and others, and say those guys are making money. I can do the same. Is that a legit business? Is that something that you need to have already gotten in? Can you do these things now? Is it something that the Black community invests in? What does that look like if we do? Or is it a bunch of, almost like a pyramid scheme? Like somebody's going to be left holding the bag,
Of course. And not the bag we think we want. Right. So, well, the short of it is, this is why ultimately my argument is that we need political organization, we need political power, and we need the power to shape policy. Now, I don't mean just mainstream electoral politics, but by political power, we need the ability to determine public policy, because I want to live in a society where it doesn't matter how good a business person you are or are not, if we can't fully change the basis of business and wealth construction and extraction to begin with. But my interest is my joke is I'm very Frank White on this issue, going back to Kings of New York. If a nickel bag is sold in the park, I want to cut. I want to live in a society where if wealth is being generated, I live here. I want to cut. I don't need to be the best business person. I don't want to have to be the one who comes up with the greatest shipping company and the new digital platform. If I'm a consumer of that platform, I've helped generate the wealth. That is, if we watch Drink Champs, if we watch Shannon, when we watch Black Power Media, when we watch DaveyD, We're part of the revenue generating process and the algorithm, blah, 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 blah. We're creating wealth. Why is all that wealth being extracted to the top 1%? Because that's ultimately still what is going to happen. To the examples that you raise, we can't get it twisted. The expansion of social media and digital media has also come with an expansion of wealth gaps, an expansion of inequality, an expansion of war. So the idea that a handful of people can set up a YouTube and a podcast and make it rich, and that means we all can, is part of the mythology of capital.
And if we don't control the means of production, as we're finding
out.
Which
we don't.
I mean, what's his name found out. It should be a prime example, whether you politically agree with him or not. But we're talking about I want to say Sean White. What's I'm talking about
Sean King.
Sean King, right? 5 million people disappeared. He pulled that, but he didn't. He doesn't own the platform that Mark Zuckerberg does.
No.
And he said literally overnight, I'm gonna take that 5 million that you have, and I'm gonna remove that. So that, and
no, the consolidation of the media that you and I have been dealing with for decades is worse. So now, YouTube and Google has more control of the space. Microsoft has more. Apple has more control of the space. A handful of Spotify's and Pandora, whatever they had. And then if we look at the financial backers of all of them, it's even less. It's even fewer who are pulling the strings here. So we're in a precarious moment. And I think, again, as I said earlier, I can wrap here. It's a crisis of methodology. Like, people have really got to be more sophisticated in determining how they know what they know and why they like what they like. And I think it's harder now than ever to reach those conclusions.
Talking with Jared Ball. As we wrap up, Jared, again, let people know about the book and where to get it and all that. And also, what does it look like, ultimately, our success? Because that's the thing, Willie D. Like you're saying, we just can't do anything. What does it look like when we're winning at the end of the day? What would be the scenarios? What would be the goals to strive for?
I think we have to go through a period of intense political organization and radicalization, and we have to go through the intense struggle of achieving political power. How we get there, I don't know exactly how to get there, but it starts with people getting offline and getting into political organizational spaces. It gets involved, people asking themselves honestly, what do I really know about this subject? How much have I dedicated to study or understanding these subjects? And how much time have I spent putting in work to change these things? How many meetings and spaces and, where have I been in all of this? Because the way it looks to me is, as I was sort of describing, at the point where we haven't decided how wealth is created and defined, I at least want to be able to say, if wealth is created, we're all benefiting, because we're all creating that wealth. There is, as I said, there is reported recently anywhere between 150 and 190 trillion dollars in personal private wealth created just in this country, just last year. Nobody should be suffering like this. Nobody should be struggling. So all I'm saying is, that's what winning looks like. When that level of wealth that could satisfy and serve the entire planet, never mind the country, is being distributed properly, so that none of us are suffering in terms of healthcare, housing, and the basics in the way that we do here, never mind the rest of the world. And as for me in my book, everything is at imixwhatilike.org, and at imixwhatilike for all your relevant social media. And Davey, I really, really appreciate all of our discussions and all your work, but this one in particular, selfishly, given this moment, it's been nice to have a chance to come and just rap about it a little bit, because it's been wild. It's been wild.
I appreciate that. I meant to ask you this, and this will be my last question, even though I asked you to wrap up. One of the myths, or one of the things that has enhanced the myth, is the notion of boycotts, right? We took away our money. And it starts off with, I think, a misreading of the Montgomery bus boycott. You know, as a historian, you tell me how you see this, but I was always fascinated when I watched the Eyes on the Prize series and they showed what was going on. So I saw the Black community come together, before there was ride shares like Lyft and Uber. We were doing that in Montgomery, Alabama, and I wish, in hindsight, that we were able to build up on that model because, um, that was a pretty efficient thing. It also showed the power of the women, because they were the main organizers around that. Joanne Robinson, know that name, because they had been at it for a number of years. It didn't happen overnight, but they had been pushing for that for a while. So when this boycott jumped off the way that it did, there was infrastructure in place. So there's lessons to be learned there. But what threw me was the White Business Council. We often focus on the Ku Klux Klan and, and people riding in the night, but the White Business Council was really the engine that controlled everything. And they pretty much, if you watch, it's like, we don't want your money. They was like, "Yeah, we don't want your money." They had huge meetings, and they were willing to go toe to toe and not give in. It was a court order that ended the boycott. It wasn't because the bus company said we lost all our money and we need you to come back. And I think that's something that we didn't really see. Now, there's been other instances like local boycotts where some of it worked for a bit, but that became the thing. Like, we just take our money and go elsewhere. What happens when people go, I don't care? I mean, people have boycotted Fox, right? We don't like what the Bill O'Reillys of the world or whoever, Sean Hannity, advertisers have, said, we just won't advertise. They're still on and making money. So,
It's funny you say
that's
that.
it. That's kind of a myth.
Oh, it's definitely a myth. It's like I was saying briefly a moment ago about Tulsa and Black Wall Street. There's a lot of misunderstandings about these histories and the ultimate impact of these struggles. I've been joking for years. Just this past year, like a month ago, I bought my first pair of Nikes since I think the first Air Jordans back in the
Wow.
80s. I haven't bought Nike because I was on my own private boycott. I had heard about some of their practices with labor overseas, and I don't remember all of that. And I just have not, and I know it's just me and it's Nike, but I think it's a microcosmic example of what you're talking about. Nike don't give a damn. They're like, Jared, you and 10,000 of your buddies could all leave us. We don't care. We're everywhere. We are everywhere. We're only worried about, to the extent that maybe Adidas cuts into our global soccer revenue. We're not worried about Jared. Go ahead. Same thing. We boycotted Exxon. We boycotted Dole bananas back in the day. Like, it's the one point is with the bus boycott in Alabama, you make a really, really good point. It wasn't the revenue from the Black community that broke it. It was more the symbolism of a Black community in struggle that the country was worried about. And that it sort of was, again, a microcosm of the broader concern where the ruling elite in this country was trying to say for a long time, look, if you would just let us get rid of the overt signage of segregation, and if you would just let us do the symbolism of it all, we'll actually have more separation and racism and class distinction, and more wealth will be made if you just comment. So that's ultimately why I think they stepped in, because the boycott itself, first of all, as you pointed out, took a tremendous amount of work from the community. It was well over a year, and it was only targeting one bus municipality. It was not targeting an international conglomerate. So we get into a little bit of fantasy when we say, well, we'll just boycott Nike or boycott Exxon. It's a little more complicated than that when we're talking about global phenomena, and that have political power and ties to media and political apparatuses in this country and elsewhere. It's not that simple. It also misrepresents, I think, how the overall economy works, especially now with the ability to franchise, to monopolize, et cetera, and so forth, and to survive without the support of segments of the Black community. So,
or to have businesses that you don't even know they're connected to. The irony is that somebody
Mm,
would say, I don't listen to the radio. I'm going to boycott, iHeart, it's Clear Channels now, iHeart. I'm going to
right,
boycott
right.
them, right? But then you went to the concert that they actually own.
That's right.
I don't like the radio station, but you went to their club that they owned and you didn't know they owned it. Or you bought,
That's a good point.
so that's the
That's a really good point.
disadvantage that we have when you have these conglomerations that as they used to brag when I was there, we'll touch you in ways that you don't know.
Mm,
We'll touch you in every
oof.
which way. We own the signage, we own the newspaper stands, we own the concert venues, we own some of the TV stations. We could, so they had all these touch points, and it's like, man, don't listen to us. But you went to that concert yesterday, right?
Every billboard in Baltimore
Yeah.
still says Clear Channel on it.
Right.
Every one of them.
So it is a challenge, and to a certain degree, I guess people would say, if I just invest my money into things that I know will do right by me, that is a better path. I guess that's at
Well, that's
least a
part of
good
the
start.
look. I talk about it in the book a little bit, but there's NPR. Not I mean not NPR. I'm sorry, Nielsen Company talked openly about creating the quote unquote conscious consumer because they recognized through survey data that Black people are happy. Not if you even it doesn't even have to be Black owned. If you just put a dashiki in the window,
Wow.
if you just put a Black Lives Matter sign in the window, like the conscious consumer kicks in, and Black people apparently, to Nielsen at least, are more they're satisfied with that. You don't even have to be Black owned. Again, whether to the extent that that's true, my point is the what we are responding to are the marketing and advertising machinations of those who are manipulating an audience intentionally, with never the concern about actual economic condition or Black liberation being the case. Like they're not, that's not the goal for them. So I mean, it's a very, that's why I keep saying we're in I think a civilizational crisis moment methodologically, where it's harder today with the more prevalent media. It's harder today to determine what's actually going on and to get to get it's easier today to have the reality disturbed and rebranded and intentionally misformed and propagated. So it's a that's why I said I really appreciate being able to
Yeah.
rap with you a little bit about it, because it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult moment.
Jared Ball, I appreciate you. I Mix What I Like is the website.
Yeah.
And you can find the book, The Myth and Propaganda of the Buying Power, Black Buying Power. An excellent book. You should definitely read it. Don't just go by the conversation we have, because we didn't even touch on a lot of the stuff you talk on cryptocurrency and a whole bunch of things that we could do a whole show on each chapter and do a breakdown on a lot of that. So there's a lot there. But I appreciate you clearing the air and letting folks kind of revisit this topic and maybe do a deeper dive into some of the themes that you picked up on, since we're talking about 2024 as a year of, revealing some truth and
Hey,
reevaluating. This might be a thing to reevaluate and to look at, not throw away, but to at least take a look and really start to have deeper understandings on some things that have been sold to us. And in this case, it was literally sold to us.